We about to start. Just 1 or 2 minutes for people to settle down. We'll be starting shortly. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miki Mama from the Eastern Cape Economic Development, Environmental Affairs and Tourism. I'll be the overall facilitator. So you'll see as the program unfolds, as it was outlined before lunch, we'll also have 2 commissions which will also have facilitators for each. So this is the Wildlife Commission. I'm looking around. There's few people that are still settling down. So fortunately, we were saved time before lunch. The commissions were all outlined, the brief, and how we're gonna go about. But just for me, just as a refresher, so in the commission, we've got this big statement on impact, which will ground our discussions and deliberations and anchored on the draft National Economic Biodiversity Strategy. So we have that impact statement on the GDP, increasing GDP contribution of the consumption use of game from extensive wildlife systems. So baseline being the 4.6 billion 2020 and 2030, which is our medium term, looking at 27.6 billion. So if you forget anything, that's where we're going. And the actions were outlined in terms of increasing the number of big 5 animals, formalizing and expanding the sustainable recreational hunting, and we have also having been these themes and focus areas in terms of transformation in the sector, or the biodiversity being mainstreamed in the economic sectors, but also formal large-scale enterprises harvesting and processing game meat rather, from extensive wildlife systems, including those from substantial plain games. So these are the actions that are going to framing our discussions today. And the team, the Secretariat support team, will help us with the capturing the inputs. But what we're looking for this afternoon, hence we also appreciate the time that we have been saved, is to ensure that you as the audience here, you're interactive, you are providing us inputs. We'll see how the program unfolds. We could also have an option for further submission of inputs. We'll see how it goes. So with that, I'm welcoming on stage our ice break activity. So that will be delivered by Sue. Dr. Sue Sneyman, over to you.
Lucky. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Great, thanks. Can you start the presentation, please? So, it's an icebreaker, but it's actually pretty hot in here, so I don't even know if we need to break any ice. But the idea with this is just to get you thinking a little bit differently, and if you heard me yesterday, I talked about the African Leadership University and some work that we've been doing on the Wildlife Economy Investment Index. And what we like to do at the African Leadership University, for those of you who don't know, we have a campus in Rwanda and one in Mauritius. And our School of Wildlife Conservation is all about the business of conservation. So we don't do anything related to ecology. Everything is about the business of conservation and how do you create these economies around conservation. And we do at the university, it's all about immersive learning or learning by doing. So I'll try and incorporate a little bit of that in this icebreaker. So just our Wildlife Economy Investment Index, who is it for? It's for governments particularly, that is our target audience, but also for investors, as well as communities and NGOs and the private sector. It's to try and understand a country's attractiveness for investment in the wildlife economy. And so what we did was we used already existing indicators to try and not reinvent the wheel. We didn't want to try and start new indicators, because to be honest, when I started the process with my team working on this, I didn't realize how many indices and indicators there are out there, and so trying to rather use what's out there. But we have since realized that we do need some new ones specifically for the wildlife economy. And so if any of you are interested, please get in touch, because we will be having some stakeholder engagement process now on the results to try and see how we can refine it to make it even more useful. Especially governments, please, we want your inputs so it's useful to you. And yeah, we went through various stakeholder engagements in the process of developing this round. So sorry, you won't be able to see it exactly there, but that is the structure of the index. So we have an overall score, and then we have two sub-indices. One is the Wildlife Status Index, and then the Investment Enabling Environment. And they are broken up into different categories. So the investment one is made up of ease of doing business, public sector capacity, and investment safety. And then the wildlife status one is made up of wildlife management and wildlife asset. So what is the stock that the country has, and then how are they managing it, and then what is the environment for investment. It's quite heavy on investment side because that is where all the indicators are. And so we really need to figure out how do we bring in more wildlife indicators to really capture that asset base, that stock of wildlife. So there are 280 indicators in the index. I'm just going to show you very briefly some of the overall results just mapped. This is the overall index score. So green is the upper third, orange, middle third, red, lower third of countries. So you can see in terms of Eastern and Southern Africa, SADC and the EAC, very strong in the green. And that, if you think about wildlife economy and what's happening currently, that is quite accurate. For the wildlife status, again, the darker green is the upper third, and you can see quite a strong emphasis in the Congo Basin, obviously a lot of asset there in terms of diversity. What we'll see is that what we're missing in terms of an indicator is we look at number of species, but we don't look at quantity of those species. So if you think about it, like Botswana doesn't have as much diversity as the Congo, but in terms of the wildlife economy, Botswana has a lot of animals for the wildlife economy, but we're not capturing that here. And so it will be really interesting. We want to figure out how do we do that. Do we do it by expert opinion on giving, countries a certain score on numbers? The wildlife asset category, so this is what do they have? Wildlife management. Interestingly, in Northern Africa, and this was a lot to do with signing of treaties and legislation related to management. And North Africa has quite a lot of that. Then the investment enabling environment sub-index, again, Southern and Eastern Africa, quite strong. And then the ease of doing business, Southern Africa, and you can see South Africa always coming up in the upper third here, which is really exciting and interesting for this particular session. Investment safety, South Africa coming in orange there. Public sector capacity, upper third, again, you can see there's quite a consistent pattern here in terms of where the countries are showing up. Now I'd like you all to please pick up your phone. And this is not something we ever really tell you to do in conferences. And please, you can either scan, I don't know if you can scan it from where you are, or otherwise go to kahoot.it. So www.kahoot.it. And it'll ask you for a game pin. Please put in the game pin. And then give yourselves a nickname. Or you can give yourselves your real name. Or you can decide that today you want to be Mickey Mouse or a leopard. Please, you can be creative, or you can just stick with your own name. So www.kahoot.it. Sydney, can we start? Or just go to that screen, thanks. So 7851238. Have you all found it? Is anyone struggling? How many of you played Kahoot before? No one. Leanne, you have. And Karen. Letitia, you have. The code will come up now again. We're just going to go to the website. Just 7-8 something. Anyone got a better memory than me? 7851238. 7851238. Are you all in? See some very serious faces there. So now is your time to shine. This is going to be a game. There's a leaders board, so we want you to be competitive. And it also will test your memory for some things I said yesterday in the panel to see how much you were listening and how much you remember. Oh, okay, so we've already got the first question. It's going. Well done. So which country scored first place in the Wildlife Economy Investment Index? I think I see you were listening yesterday because it was South Africa. So the majority of you, 48, said South Africa. Next question, please. Top right. Sorry, Sydney. Yeah. Okay, scoreboard first. Mizana is first, Titsi, and then MM. You know who you are. And you'll see this will carry on. And with Kahoot, the quicker you answer, the more points you get. Okay, so it's not just about getting it right, it's about speed. Next one. What percentage of South Africa is covered by terrestrial protected areas? Is it 14.5, 5.4, 1.7, or 9.3? Let's see how you got. It's very quick, the time. So the answer is 9.3%. Most of you thought we had much more, but we get in there. That's what you're going to be talking about next. Next question, or scoreboard, sorry. has no, Vijani has moved up. We have the rhino at the top. Then Baobab Button, I like these names, has moved into second place. And Claude Tao, the elephant lion, has moved down. Next, please. What percentage of South Africa is covered by marine protected areas? We're just laying the foundation of that asset base. What do we have in South Africa? You've got 6 seconds. Is it 5.4, 15.5, 1.7, 10.3? Most people got it right. Well done. 15.5%. So we have hit the target for not 30 by 30 necessarily, but we've hit our marine target for ASHI targets. Next, please. But that was very score. Baobab Button has got to the top. Whew. Bejan, TK, Warthog. We've got a lot of movement here. We need some consistency. Next. Okay, what continental ranking did South Africa receive in the wildlife status sub-index? So where do you think South Africa ranked in terms of the asset and the management of that asset? Do you think we were first, third, fifth, or 10th in Africa? We were first. Guys, have faith, have faith. We had a lot of people saying third. Next. Let's see, TK. Ooh, I see, is this TK in the front? Very competitive here in the front. Adam and then Warthog. Next one. Now the pressure's on, TK. In the wildlife status sub-index, what ranking did South Africa in both wildlife management and the asset? So we came the same position in terms of the asset as well as the management of that asset. First, third, fifth, or 10th again. Let's see if you have more faith. Ah, I like your attitude. Everyone said first, but it's actually third. So the reason you might ask why that's different is because we came first overall, but third in those subcategories because of the indicators. So LA, Baobab Button, TK, has dropped to third. Next, Baobab Button is very consistent to whoever Baobab Button is. What continental ranking did South Africa get in the investment enabling environments? So where do you think we are? First, third, sixth, or 12th in terms of enabling environment for investment in Africa? We are actually sixth in Africa. The Mauritius and Seychelles, a lot of the islands did very well. Rwanda. So most of you thought we were third. Well done. I'm liking this positive attitude. Next, please. Sure. LA, Baobab Button, TK. No change in the scoreboard. Next. In which category did South Africa rank the lowest? Where were we the lowest? Ease of doing business, investment safety, wildlife management, public sector capacity, or wildlife assets? So there are 5 categories. Which one did we rank lowest? Well done. Investment safety was, most people said that, and then public sector capacity. So, but the majority had it right, investment safety. Next, please. Sure, the top 3 staying very solid there. Come on, guys. The rest of you need to knock them off their podium. Next. Which 3 subcategories did South Africa rank first? This is quite a long one. I gave a bit more time for this one, so you have to read it. Was it species richness, money growth, access to finance? I'm not going to read them, others will confuse you. So which 3 did we come first in? Got 10 seconds. So we came first in all 3 in Africa. Yeah, access to markets, wildlife management effectiveness, and endemic species. Well done. Most of you got that right. Well done. That was, that was a complicated one. Next. Still no shift in the top 4. Come on. We need some more speed, because the only way you're going to beat them now is speed. Next. Which subcategory is the only one in which South Africa ranked in the lower third of countries in Africa? So you know where we came last or low? Is it business operations, security and stability, social inclusion, or money growth? So we came in the lower third in Africa in one of these. 3 seconds. Money growth, interestingly, which is related to that investment safety. Remember I said investment safety was our lowest, so money growth was one of our lowest. Next. Oh, we have a little change. TKs, it dropped into 4th. But LA and Baobab Button still keeping gold and silver there. Next. At the indicator level, for how many of the overall indicators was South Africa first in Africa? So this is at 280 indicators. How many did we come first in out of the 280? 153, 9, 51, or 20? Let's see how optimistic you are. So the correct answer is 20. Most of you thought 51. Hey, we have a winner. Next. So do you think the revised National Biodiversity Economy Strategy will keep South Africa at number 1 in the index? When we do our next iteration, do you think that this new strategy that you are going to discuss in the next 2 panels is going to keep us at number 1? Because the strategy is for the next few years, so what is it? Do you think so? Yay! Yes, most of you think it will. For those of you who maybe are not sure or know, now is your time to give inputs as to why you think it's not going to work. Where does it need improvement? How are you going to, what do we need to talk about? And those who said yes, what do we need to do to make sure that South Africa stays at number 1? Sydney, just the last few slides. I just want to show you some more slides on the South African score, just because this is exactly, this index is showing, what is the possibility, and now you are all going to be discussing this possibility. And, how do we make sure that the strategy is implemented to make sure that that index ranking stays there? So for our reports, we've done 54 national reports, so a report for every single country based on those 280 indicators. And they're all available. I'll put a QR code just now. You can look at the website. There's also a nice dashboard that you can look. You can compare countries. If you're working in more than one country and you want to compare Malawi and South Africa or Botswana and South Africa, you can do that according to every single one of the 280 indicators or by category or subcategory. So I think it's coming just to show you a bit of that. But I hope you found the index useful in terms of understanding what you're all going to be discussing in the next 2 panels. Oh, we win in Sydney. But I'm really glad to see that there is a lot of optimism in the room. I certainly feel very optimistic with all the discussions that we've had so far. So the South African profile is available, and all our research is available open access. The national reports that we do start off with an overview of the socioeconomic, the development side, and then the conservation, that asset. What does the country have? So you'll see that in the report. Then it has that table that I showed you with South Africa's results. So you can see nicely here that South Africa is mostly green, which means it's in the upper third. And then where it is orange is where it's in the middle third, and red is lower third. So money growth, ecological habitats, and key biodiversity areas, it ranked in the lower parts, whereas the others, and in the reports, which I'll show you a bit more, on the website, this is what the website looks like, so you can go to any region in Africa, you can go to South Africa's page, and it'll give you more detail on South Africa. It'll show you the category ranks and scores that South Africa received. So like, for example, ease of doing business, we came second, and our score was 71.22 out of 100. So it's quite a nice overview. It also shows you in different ways the 2 sub-indices and the overall score in comparison to SADC overall and Southern Africa. So you can see where we are situated in our part of Africa. And then the dashboard, as I said, you can compare countries, you can compare regions, you can compare regional economic communities if you want to compare SADC and EAC. Here I looked at South Africa, Malawi, and Botswana, so you can compare, as I say, if you're working in different countries. This is comparing, I think, the regions. So there, if you'd like to, you can scan that QR code and it'll take you to our Wildlife Economy Investment Index website. And everything is available there, and we'd really love comments and inputs, especially on the results. So there's a whole methodology report there if you're interested. If you're also a numbers nerd and you want to understand how we did all of this, there's a 100-page methodology report that you can read. There's also a full report on the whole continent, and then, as I said, these 54 national reports. We're loading the last 19 in the next 2 days. So one time I wished Africa had less countries, because it's taken a long time to do 54 reports. But yeah, please, we really, and as I say, if you want to be involved in the ongoing engagements on this, please get in touch. And then just lastly, to end off, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we are going to be launching the African Wildlife Economy Community of Practice. It's just a group of people who are trying to work together. You're going to have Frank on your panel next. He's also part of this community of practice. Because there's so much going on in the space in Africa, we want to make sure everyone is talking to each other and collaborating to also maximize impact. So we're not duplicating efforts, so trying to see where people are working, what they're doing, how can we make more impact. So you can look on the African Leadership, or look on the School of Wildlife Conservation on LinkedIn if you like to see the link to join this webinar tomorrow as well. But thank you, and enjoy your next 2 panels, and yeah, let's make it work, this strategy, and keep South Africa at number 1. Thank you.
Another round of applause for Sue. Great vibe indeed, but also we are enthusiastic. So looking at the scores. So we are now going to move to the first. So remember we said we're going to have two commissions or sub-commissions for this commission. So the first one is the balancing wildlife and the economy. And Sam, please come over. Dr. Sam Ferreira will be hosting the panelists for this one. I'm going to hand over to Sam to call over the panelists. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon. It's a privilege to have you all here, and Sue has given us a very big challenge. We have to go beyond sustainability, and we're going to try and discuss a little bit about that. I want to know from Sue, did you get consent of all of us to give all our information to you? No, I'm teasing you this, so that was very, very useful. We're going to have a discussion here on balancing wildlife and the economy, and maybe we'll come to a different conclusion at the end. And I'm going to invite my panelists to the floor here, or to the chairs up front here. The first is Peter Swart, who is from the Sustainable Use Coalition of South Africa. He's the chairman. I think that's probably very useful having Peter. Give him a round of applause, guys. Dr. Frank Forris is online, so he will chat to us a little bit later when we get to a question that is particularly focused on some things. But I would like to also invite Seren Madurai from WWF South Africa. Give him also a round of applause, please, guys. And then we have got people that are really at the coalface and doing some sort of very important work. First is Simon Mafela. Where's Simon? Joining us from the Chuvula Game Reserve. I think that's a really important element of how we can think about where we can expand and grow, achieving that going beyond sustainability that Sue has challenged us with. Our next participant is Chief Matsila. He is actually representing the Sandparks board member. So Chief, please welcome the Chief on the floor. And then last but not least, we have got Dr. Herbert Ntuli from University of Pretoria. Herbert and I started doing some work together, so we're good friends. So please give my good friend also a welcome on the call. So you may ask, how can we do things better? Because I think that is what the implications are from some of the challenges that Sue has given us. And when I look you look at our theme, thriving nature and people. And everything that we have listened to in the last 2 days has hinged very much on that thriving of nature and people together. And I think it was Yolan and Morne that highlighted yesterday to us that biodiversity is actually at the heart of all our economies, not just biodiversity economy. And why is that important? Because generally there's nothing that we use that we cannot link back to biodiversity. So for example, we have got typically our species that are generating some or other ecological infrastructure and the clean water that we drink. There's a whole set of things that biodiversity produces to us that we use. And that what we use is what leads to our own values that we have, our own outcomes. In fact, it leads to sustainable development goals. What's preventing it from being properly pulled together? And when you think a little bit about it, there's two elements in that supply chain I've talked about. We've got the biological side, all the species and everything else, and we've got the social side. That's how we're interacting with it. And in our theme, we have highlighted that we really want to try and address how do we deal with things like inequality, poverty, and unemployment. Well, I want to propose to you that unemployment and poverty are actually a consequence of inequality. So let's focus on that in this discussion right here. And of course, we're on a wildlife discussion. So what is wildlife? Now let me introduce myself. I'm Sam Ferreira. I'm from Sandparks. I'm the large mammal ecologist. It doesn't mean it's just big animals or animals that are big in body size. It's anything from a springbok to an elephant. So we're going to obviously have a discussion about that. But let's think a little bit about how can we think about this inequality problem. Okay. And the very first bit of this is when you go back to Thomas Piketty's considerations of inequality, it had three elements. The first element was around income, inequality in income. The second element is inequality in ownership. And the third element is inequality in power. And I'm going to first let us focus in a discussion with our colleagues here on the floor, or on the stage here, on dealing with the inequality linked to income and ownership. How can we address that? And then we will end up asking the third question, dealing with inequality and power. Are you all good with that? All right. Well, thank you very much. We are privileged to have Peter on the stage here, and Peter are very much in the practical interface space, I guess. And I would like to ask Peter, this is a very long question, by the way. Peter, what are the available mechanisms to really increase the number of animals for things like hunting, game meat production, other byproducts that's linked to some of these big species that we're talking about, or big animals, and particularly in community as well as private areas? Please, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The South African wildlife model is a success story in conservation and sustainable use, with two primary mechanisms for maintaining and expanding animal populations being first the public domain reserves and secondly private-owned game reserves. South Africa has excelled in wildlife management practices, setting international standards. In fact, we are world leaders. The various associations within the wildlife value chain is another important mechanism. These include wildlife ranching and breeding associations, hunting and auxiliary services providers such as taxidermy associations. They aim to self-regulate, set standards, best practices, offer training and work with stakeholders to ensure the sustainable use of wildlife resources. Their efforts are driven by a commitment to conservation, economic development, and community empowerment. South Africa's success in wildlife conservation and utilization relies on effective management practices and collaboration between the various stakeholders. Captive breeding programs such as the rhino, African grey parrot, and the Nile crocodile showcase our proficiency in wildlife management. By demonstrating the economic value of wildlife through activities such as hunting, tourism, and venison production, we incentivize conservation efforts and ensure the viability of wildlife populations. This created numerous job and economic opportunities for both individuals and communities. But we must also guard against unrealistic expectations. Despite our achievements, several constraints hinder the full realization of our goals. First of all is the regulatory framework. Streamlining permit and administrative systems is essential to create an enabling environment for wildlife economy. The recent TOPS regulations have eased transportation of wildlife products between provinces, but include abundant and common species on the list. Further improvements are necessary. Quotas and regulations. The issuing of quotas for hunting and export of certain species, such as elephant, leopard, and black rhino, requires careful consideration to balance conservation objectives with sustainable use. The challenges from the anti-use NGOs. Campaigns against hunting and wildlife utilization poses challenges to our industry. Collaboration with scientific experts and government institutions is crucial to counter misinformation and advocate for evidence-based policies. True science from knowledgeable field ecologists rather than desktop research must prevail. Market access. Restrictions imposed by shipping companies and airlines on transportation of wildlife products impede our market. We call for support in accessing new international, regional, and local markets to enhance the economic value and viability of wildlife businesses. Multi-departmental cooperation is essential, as often issues fall within trade and industry or international relations, for instance. We recommend the following. First, policy support. Continued support from government agencies in creating an enabling regulatory environment is essential. This includes making land and resources available to community-based projects and subsidies for existing and emerging wildlife businesses. We rely on government to advocate for evidence-based conservation policies. International cooperation. Strengthen cooperation with international bodies and government is crucial for regulating wildlife trade while promoting sustainable utilization. We need initiatives aimed at facilitating legal and sustainable trade rather than restrictive trade. In conclusion, the energy observed at this Biodiversity Indaba underscores our collective commitment to wildlife conservation and sustainable use. By addressing constraints and implement solutions outlined in this report, we can further enhance South Africa's reputation as a global leader in wildlife management. We are happy to see many of our prior recommendations in the presentation at this event and will continue to assist and advise where we can. We extend our gratitude to the organizations and sponsors for this event and looking forward to realizing positive outcome for both people and wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. That was very important inputs there around regulatory requirements, around actually market requirements, and some initiatives that they need to do if we want to go beyond that sustainability that Sue was talking. I'm going to give you later what I mean by that. We've just got message that we have to speed up things apparently. So now I'm putting a lot of pressure on the rest of the panel members. Peter, you were lucky, eh? You got away with it. So I'm going to ask, just for your information, our panel member, Joel Mamabolo, could not make it. But I think there are some important points that you're going to need to think a little bit about in case you want to make an input later, about potential conflicting land users, particularly when we have got different other type of land users like agricultural requirements, etc., which may impose on our ability to grow and expand the wildlife economy, as what Peter has highlighted in that particular input. But let me go to Serenia. Sorry, first of all, I did ask the technical staff to see if you can get Dr. Frank Forries on. And I'm going to ask Frank, please give me an indication when you manage to get him online. I'm not seeing any indications yet. Here we go. Frank, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm sure you've been following what we've been saying. How can the use of traditional regulations, economic incentives, or market-based policies be enhanced or harmonized to promote sustainable use of wildlife? Frank, please do entertain us. You've got about 2 minutes to give us some feedback. Thank you. Frank, I'm just checking, you may still be muted. While we're trying to sort that out, maybe I can ask that same question for Serene in a moment, and then we can get back to Frank if the technological guys have sorted it for us. Can I ask you the same question?
Sure.
Please go for it. You can remember the question.
Yeah, I remember the question. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having me on this panel. And it's a very important discussion. So I've been working at WWF in the sustainable finance team since about 2016. And I joined WWF from the investment industry. And myself and my manager, we both come from an asset management background, and we wanted to bring some of that learning and understanding and expertise into the conservation sector and the environmental sector. When we joined, we understood how investments work, how finance works, so we understood equity, debt, investment solutions. And as part of our strategy at WWF, we look at financing green and greening finance. So what does that mean? So financing green, we want to create financial solutions that's going to allocate capital away from harmful areas towards sustainable areas, mostly with regards to the environmental sustainability. So we had a few green financial solutions that we set up, and that's been running for a few years now. Also part of our focus is on the financing green side. So we look at policies, disclosures, best practice, etc. When it came down to the financing green on biodiversity and wildlife, we really started to struggle there. People at the time, they thought ESG, green investing, their minds went straight to solar panels because that's something that they can easily conceptualize, renewable energy. And sure, renewable energy, the investment case is quite clear and it's easily understandable. As sustainable investors, we went beyond that and we looked at water investments, we looked at waste investments, we looked at impact investments, we looked at blended finance, etc., etc. But it came down to the wildlife economy and the wildlife sector. We ran into a brick wall almost. So our knowledge of equity and finance and investments and all that, it didn't translate into making investments into the wildlife sector. So the traditional capital markets and how that work, we couldn't really apply that so much into the wildlife sector. Another thing I want to say that if this was easy to put more investments into the wildlife economy, then people would have been doing it for a long time. The banks would have been giving capital, the asset managers, the private equity managers, etc., etc. So if it was easy, people would have been doing it for a long time. So we needed to think outside the box. We needed to be innovative. And we did some research and background into biodiversity investments and wildlife economy investments. And through this process, we met with the Wilderness Foundation Africa and Candace Stevens and WWF and WFA, Wilderness Foundation. We formed the Sustainable Finance Coalition. Now, the coalition was formed as a way to bring people from across sectors together who are passionate and convicted towards working on financial solutions that's going to attract more money into financing of our most precious landscapes, biodiversity assets, and seascapes. So really plugging that biodiversity finance gap, which we spoke about yesterday. What we learned was that there's no silver bullet here, right? There's no one fund that's going to be the solution to everything. There's no one finance solution that's going to plug the entire finance gap. And we also learned that every landscape is different, right? So the west of South Africa is very much different from the east, and it's different from the south and the north, etc., etc. So there's no silver bullet here. And in the few years that the coalition has been going, we've developed a full inventory of solutions, and that inventory is growing and growing. We started off with 1 or 2, and now we're close to 14 plus. So we realized that we need to have a suite of solutions that's going to help attract finance into the various landscapes, the various wildlife economy sectors. And then what we're learning from this conference and what we're seeing is that there's been a bigger policy push. So we've got the global biodiversity framework that's happened, and then South Africa has supported that. And then now we've got the white paper as well as the biodiversity economy strategy. So all these things are going to be impetus towards increasing investment and finance into the wildlife economy and the biodiversity sector more broadly. Similar to in 2016 or 2017 when the Paris Agreement was signed, there was a lot more impetus and people interested in making investments into climate. And now we're seeing a lot of those similar things happening in the biodiversity space, and more people are reaching out to us in terms of how can we get involved and how can we make the sustainable finance work in the biodiversity and wildlife economy sectors. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. Give him a bit of a round, you guys. So I think this cross-links very well to some of the discussions that we had yesterday on sustainable financing and all these other sort of things. And it does seem like what you're highlighting is that there are some scope to think a bit about how do we incentivize, perhaps with some of our regulations and mechanisms that we are currently using. I want to see if Dr. Frank or Dr. Forres is online now, and let him just give us an input on this question on incentivizing some of our initiatives.
I'm online, and I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you now. Frank, do you remember the question? I'm sure you do, so please go ahead.
Should I say a few words? Is it okay?
Yes, please do go ahead. We can hear you loud and clear.
Sound on the other side when I talk. Apologies for that. Um, don't know if I should just go.
Go for it.
Looking at WhatsApps and side messages and everything. Should I just start? Okay. We'll go for it.
Yes.
I'm Frank Voorhees at the African Wildlife Economy Institute at Stellenbosch. And a couple points I'd like to make on this topic, and it's echoing some of the conversation that's already started. One is on taking a landscape approach, and the second is on enabling regulations and also standards and certification schemes, enabling the economy to be verified, to be well regulated. So the first one on landscapes, we're at Stellenbosch University. If you look around Stellenbosch, you have a huge economy wrapped around wine. And it's a whole mosaic of small and medium enterprises. Think of that for the wildlife economy. Think of a landscape that has animal products, plant products, it could be edible plants, it could be medicinal plants, it could be meat, it could be hides, it could be leather products, it could be fuel wood, it could be building materials, and it can also be services like tourism, photographic tourism, adventure tourism, hunting, fishing tourism, as well as ecosystem services like carbon credits, watershed protection, and so on. So the first big focus is to really take a landscape/community approach to this topic, and not just think of isolated businesses where one landscape does kudu, and another landscape does wild rooibos, and another landscape does buku, but a landscape that has a portfolio of goods and services. Which the one liner is, if we want to have a diversified landscape, we need a diversified economy, diversified wildlife enterprises. So that's the first point. And I think we can see that with all of the different things that have been talked about this conference coming together at the landscape level. The second point I wanted to make, and re-emphasize in earlier remarks, is the need for an enabling regulatory environment and the need for enabling standards and certification schemes. We need to both ensure that wild species are utilized sustainably, responsibly, and we need to also assure stakeholders, regulators, consumers, investors, buyers, that this is happening. And so on the one side, you have the role and the responsibility of government to set up good enabling, facilitating regulatory practices with respect to both domestic use and with respect to imports. So that even includes ensuring that the exports of endangered species products, and that could be a trophy hunt from an elephant, for example, is legal and is sustainable, is non-detrimental, to use the technical language. And then, in addition to the regulations from government, industry itself needs to step up. It can step up with its own standards and its own certification systems to verify that this product, this game meat, is responsible, this leather product is responsible, it's been properly sourced, it's safe, there's been humane treatment of the animal, etc. And so we have some of these standards being developed in South Africa now. There's one for wildlife ranching in general, and wildlife economy, I think it's being called now, and one for game meat that's coming up. There's some international standards, like Fair Wild is a standard for harvesting wild plants, and the Marine Stewardship Council is a standard for harvesting wild fish. And so if you can see, then imagine a combination of good enabling government regulation with good industry standards. That's going to help this economy move quickly. It's going to allow that investment to flow. It's going to allow the products to get to market and so on. So to conclude, two key things. One is the, the landscape community approach to enterprise development. Look at a diversity of wildlife enterprise to enable and maintain and restore a diverse landscape. And second, enabling regulations and enabling standards and certifications to ensure good practice and to assure stakeholders that those good practices are happening. Okay, I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Frank. That was a very useful input, and I noticed a few colleagues or delegates were sitting upright when Frank said we should be like wine farmers, you know. But I think the principle is very clear. It's about how do we maximize diversity of the wildlife products that we have got. How do we make sure that everybody has got a fair chance in participating in those things? And how do we cascade those into many small businesses that are connected to each other? So those are very important points. Which brings me to the third. You remember we had the three elements of inequality. The first two was about income and ownership. And a lot of what the panel members have spoken about now already links to those elements. But what about power? And power is about how you participate and how you make decision making. And I think the three colleagues that I would like to address this next question to can help us guide how do we get meaningful participation in policies that the regulating wildlife sector can be strengthened to build confidence in the investors, the consumer and the society as a whole, that the product is sustainably sourced, safe and benefit people, so I don't get strange products that are busy placing people's health at risk, for example, and compliant, of course, with the legislative framework. And I'm first going to turn to Simon as a practitioner, as having a property and doing these sort of things, to reflect on those sort of challenges and how we can improve that. Simon, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. Greetings to everyone. My name is Simon. I come from Limpopo, from Chivula CPA. We actually received land, 20,000 hectares of land, and we realized the land is suitable for wildlife trade, and part of the business is ecotourism. And in the process, I've come to learn a lot. And with regard to the question that's been put forward, the question of strengthening the policies to make sure that the consumer, to make sure that the investor and the society in general is actually pleased. I have realized that there is actually quite a number of challenges that needs to be addressed. I look at it in the sense that this industry in the past, or is a dynamic industry, is constantly changing. Wildlife is constantly changing. Just by the time when we got into this business, there was a huge actually explosion in terms of people making money out of buffalo sales and so on, to a point where at one stage one buffalo was sold for around 165 million at an auction. But at the moment, if you go around and check how much the buffaloes are fetching, you realize a lot has changed. And it tells me there is constant change. It's a dynamic process. If you go and buy young buffaloes and hope to breed or make them grow to a point where you can benefit, by the time they become fully grown, things might have changed. So it means also the policies and regulations needs to be changed so that it suits the situation. For example, if you had you are an investor and you go to an auction, you buy rhinos, hoping to sell them, maybe through hunting and so on, and then all of a sudden there is a CITES resolution to say you can no longer trade in this thing, or whether perhaps you go and buy pangolins, perhaps in the traditional way, and then you hope to make money out of it, and all of a sudden a decision from outside of the environment, from outside of your country, is taken to say this is how you have to trade in this kind of species. It means now, because the purpose of the investor would be to make a return on investment, you expect to make money out of what you are producing, and at the same time, the consumer, the person who's supposed to come and buy, either is hunting or whatever, they've got specific things they look for. For example, for a buffalo or for a kudu, they will be looking at the size or the inches of the horns and so on. And if you do not have a clear understanding of that, you may think if you've got 100 buffaloes, it means you've got a lot of money, only to find that somebody who's got 4 buffaloes as compared to you because that one has got the scientific understanding of what is needed, then you actually end up not benefiting as much as the other one. So for example, in terms of the investor, when he is investing, he's actually expecting to get something, profit. And if, for example, as a community, you are given, say, buffaloes, they come from sun parks or from somewhere else, and these people, when they give these buffaloes, they don't actually look at the quality. For example, they don't look at the genes and so on. The kind of client that you're going to service will expect specifications, will expect something, the quality. For example, if you are selling, say, fruits, and you want to export the fruits to markets overseas, the international clients have got their own understanding, they've got their own expectations. If you don't meet these expectations, you are not going to make it in the market. So as an investor, you need to know exactly who you are going to service, what kind of quality are you supposed to produce. It's not just a question of the number of, the quantity of what you have. It is also about the quality of what is expected there. If it's meat, do you meet the specifications in terms of whether it's halal? If you are supposed to export, are you going to be able to meet the quantities in terms of the size? Say if they expect you to export in tons, are you going to be able to do it? So it means also the society as well, is the people in general. If you are operating in the environment, are you balancing what you're doing in terms of, are you over harvesting or under harvesting? For example, if you've got elephants and the population of the elephants is growing and growing, and if you are not able to control that, it is under, and the underutilizations can be a disadvantage. And if you over harvest as well, is also a disadvantage. So there should be a balance there. That is what I've actually learned. So I've also learned that we should actually also become very pragmatic when it comes to our policies. For example, if I am breeding, say, rhinos, and then all of a sudden I'm no longer supposed to sell those rhinos, where am I supposed to get money to continue to run the enterprise, to continue to make sure that there is conservation? It is important then to say, perhaps we need to have policies that will help to deal with that situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a good illustration of how we even should be participating meaningfully in international levels on what is influencing us in South Africa. Thank you very much for that, Simon. I'm going to turn to Chief, who to reflect on what agencies will be thinking a little bit about and how we can have participation in a way and what sort of policies can do. Chief, please.
No, thank you very much.
Chief, you got about 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've got a few minutes, I'm told. No, I think for ourselves, I'm Chief Matsila from St. Parks. I'm a board member there. Other than that, we also have a nature reserve as the community. And I can see that your audience in the main is people who want to be game farmers. So I can give you one impala each from the nature reserve, so you can start to be game farmers. Now, you see, from our perspective as one of the government agencies at the coal phase of implementing these programs, we have just identified that there are policy gaps within the sector, especially the wildlife sector, in the sense that if you look at our policies, they are more aligned to the democratic dispensation in terms of covering the rights and aspirations of the communities. But these policies, have got a shortcoming in that we need to refine them and transform them and also strengthen these policies to accommodate and encourage the application of African conservation protocols, belief systems, and values that date back to time immemorial. You'll see that the main issue that we are dealing with is that we must strive to decolonize and Africanize our policies so that they are more relevant, acceptable, appropriate, and in accordance with the needs and aspirations of the African cultures and societies. It will be important, ladies and gentlemen, to mainstream and integrate the African cultures in the policy framework within the wildlife sector. The cultural and socio-ecological relations between people and wildlife from a historic perspective offer sustainable solutions to challenges and opportunities related to the conservation sector and the wildlife subsector as a whole. So we are saying that the African communities and societies must participate in the review process and formulation processes in a prioritized way to achieve an inclusive, representative, acceptable policy regime within the sector, in particular the biodiversity conservation fraternity as well. So in our view, the policy review process should follow a stratified and strategic approach to accommodate the interests of those who are vulnerable and more dependent on natural and wildlife resources, such as women, the youth, and people living with disabilities. The custodian of natural resources and wildlife, especially traditional leaders who are the owners of the land on behalf of the communities, must play a pivotal role on the review of policies and legislation. Proper and appropriate consultation processes which are inclusive and transparent must be set in motion to ensure the interests of traditional leaders and their communities are catered for within the policy regime in the wildlife sector. A very key, ladies and gentlemen, because more often we do a cosmetic exercise of engaging at a later stage of policy review and formulation of legislation, but if we do that robustly and on time, we can achieve more. The primary consumers of natural resources and wildlife, such as traditional healers, herbalists, and other spiritual leaders, should also form part of the process. Because their skills and expertise regarding biodiversity conservation, as passed on from generation to generation, must be utilized and considered when policies are formulated and reviewed. At the core of the policy formulation and review process should be the benefits that such policy instruments aim to bring to the local people who are dependent on natural resources and wildlife for their daily livelihoods. The thrust of the policies in the wildlife sector must be focused on improving the lives of local people through sustainable creation of jobs and eradication of poverty, with skills development and socio-economic development programs being the enabling programs and projects. Accordingly, we need to strive to achieve a policy environment which considers the diverse needs of societies underpinned by the principle of sustainable development to achieve socio-economic development whilst entrenching the conservation of wildlife and biodiversity in general. So in conclusion, what it means is that you investors and consumers are likely to trust and have commitment to our programs and fund and support if they realize that the policy regime in place creates stability and caters for the needs of everyone involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve Matsila. Those were a number of very strong guidances on how we can actually participate more and how have our people participate more meaningfully. I'm going to ask Dr. Ntuli to reflect on the academic side of things, on what we can learn. Dr. Ntuli, you've got about 2 to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Sam. This is a very interesting area. about policy, creating an enabling environment. So policies, they have objectives that they want to achieve. And to achieve these objectives, there's need for certain things to be in place so that these objectives are actually achieved. So one of the most important things I think that has been said, let me reiterate it, is the incentive part of the policy. So what type of incentives that the policy convey to economic actors? So that becomes very, very important in terms of behaviors that we see in terms of attracting investors into the wildlife economy. So I don't want to waste time by looking at what the previous speakers have been saying, but let me look at some important aspects of policy. One of the most important aspects of policy that we often not look into are the unintended consequences of policy. So policies have got intended consequences and unintended consequences. So usually when we design policies, we want to achieve certain objectives, but we forget about the other side of the policies. So this also speaks to the incentive part. So this, I think this is the problem that we have had with wildlife policies in terms of the community side, because the communities did not see any benefit from the whole activity, and they were never consulted in the initial stages, and quite often we find communities are kind of marginalized when it comes to things that to deal with the mainstream of the economy. But we have been trying to bring them into the mainstream and also trying to revise these policies over time to make sure that the communities are also involved. So because these policies, they are enacted without taking into consideration the communities, you find the behaviors that they display are not consistent with what we want, the objectives of policy. So these are the gaps that we might need to address as we move, and this is the reason why we are here to talk about the community, how we can incorporate the community into the mainstream of the wildlife economy. Let me talk about also the second part of the element of policies, which are the impacts of the policies. What impact does the policy have on the community, on the investors, on the consumers? So we need to think in terms of short-term and long-term impacts. So these impacts, they are very, very important so that we know whether the impact of the policy is negative or positive. And for those impacts that are negative, we need to minimize them while amplifying the policies that are positive. So let me leave you with this. In the academic field, we work more with equations. So I want to leave you with an equation. So this is an equation where we have the wildlife, which is the resource that we are managing. And then we have the protected areas. So the extended protected areas, we have the government, they're coming in with the policies and everything, and we have the NGOs. And there is a gap somewhere. And we equate this to conservation. So this is an equation where we have all the players contributing to it, and the policies, we assume they are right, and we are missing an important stakeholder, which is the community, which is part of the equation. And without this community, the equation is unstable. If it's a nuclear bomb, it's going to explode. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ntuli, for that insight. It highlights that science can do well. We've got an equation to solve now. And this is part, I think, what this discussion is all about. I think the point that Dr. Ntuli makes about unintended consequences of policy are really important. And this is usually the case if I have not had meaningful participation in people in developing those things. So thank you to the panel for that. We have got a bit of time here to field some questions from the floor, and I'm going to look for a hand in each one of the rows. I've got number one here from my colleague from Esimangaliso. There's very silence in this. You're probably still on the wine thinking, you know. And then I have got number two sitting right in the back there. I can't see who it is, and I've got the number three here. Is that all I've got? And a number four. You must remember your numbers. I'm not going to remember it. All right.
Thank you. Excuse me, facilitator, because I'll be a little bit more radical. You know, if you look at our country, we've got a very glossy and promising constitution, which seeks to address or bring about redress in the injustices or things that happened in the past. And it comes with a number or a plethora of legislation and strategies to deal with those issues. I mean, if you look at, for instance, this strategy that we're talking about, and you listen to its intention, it's very clear. It tries to bring about transformation in this sector. But the million-dollar question is, are we tackling the fundamental issues that are going to translate into this transformation or desired transformation in the sector? For instance, there's an issue of access to land. There's an issue of access to finance, which is very fundamental in the transformative aspect of what we're trying to do. Again, if you read the NBS in particular, you will also see that it talks to issues of establishing, the forum, the wildlife forum. It also, I think we now have the bio-prospecting forum. We also have the forestry and the aquaculture and the marine forum as well. Now, you start asking yourself whether, is this going to see the light at the end of the tunnel? I just want to put forward a recommendation, because that recommendation is also there in the strategy itself, to say it also seeks to optimize the various institutional arrangements. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 forum. Can't we bring this into one?
Good point.
And then use what this NBS is identifying, because it's clear. It identifies that there needs to be streamlining of the regulatory environment, which is an obstacle to what we're trying to achieve, supporting research and development and skills development, issues of fostering entrepreneurship, access to finance, improvement of various economic transformative initiatives. So can't we look at these, which are already in the NBS, as an action plan? But it mustn't be an action plan, it must be a time-bound action plan. So I think those will be my submissions. The questions is, are we tackling the two questions, access to finance and access to land? Thank you.
So I think that's very useful input. Thank you very much. I think it's a recommendation. It's not necessarily a question to us. Those are very good questions. And I like those suggestions. It's not just about reviewing the policies that, like what Chief and the colleagues have said. It's actually also about taking our existing ones and making them efficient, if I'm hearing right. Number 3, which I think was in the back. Oh, sorry, number 2.
Oh, I'm 3. Chair and the panelists. My name is Wisani Mlambo from Mahlati Game Reserve. The thing that I want to know, as you may have heard the President talking about the land, the massive land that is available, in rural areas. So we're one of the people who have the massive land, which is about 12,000 hectares. And then we've already established a game reserve, which is called Mahlati Game Reserve. So, Chair, I just want to ask if it's possible, it will be possible for us in order to get the platform so that we are able to articulate or explain our project and what we have done so far, for the purposes of finding the investors. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much for the question. I'm sure my dear colleagues has made notes on that, and they can use and reach out to you to actually provide you access to that platform. Where's number 3? Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much. I am Chief Magona from Gijana community, one of the communities that are actually located along the Kruger National Park fence, and a previous adoptee of Kruger National Park's inclusion program. What I have is more of an input than a question. because as I was listening, even from the first day, specifically in the area of skills development, I'll say skills development because one of the speakers had said that the issues that are faced in these underprivileged communities is that the standard and the criteria of investors is too high for them to meet. And this is like a common sense program that is actually just a symptom of a larger problem, which is negligence. Now, the negligence is that biodiversity economy, along with other sectors like mining, are the backbone of what makes this country work. Now, how can we have, as a country, such important sectors that are driving our country, yet people are not skilled in that particular sector? Why isn't the educational system integrating biodiversity and mining into the schools as compulsory subjects? You know, I'll give you a very good example. If we were fish, it would be like not teaching our children how to swim and expecting them to be able to hunt and prosper. So how can you expect to bring this strategy to our people who are not educated about biodiversity, people who still have superstitious beliefs about animals that we consider dangerous? I tell you this because this is something that we experience on the ground, and I had hoped that the likes of Dr. Herbert Ntuli, who has visited our community, would have raised that skills development is a crucial thing. If you really want our communities to participate, you have to come into our communities. Don't put your skills development programs on websites. Our people don't even have money to buy data. Come into our communities, come with your exhibitions, come with your programs for skills development, teach our people where they are. And what you will get out of that is a strong workforce that will assist you in safeguarding this biodiversity. We will have young entrepreneurs, because we have a lot of talent in our communities, who will come up from these programs and contribute to this economy. So I would say that we need to lobby to have the educational system integrate these things as compulsory subjects. Don't teach our people how to make apps. Teach our people how to farm, animal husbandry, how to mine. This is what drives our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chief. That was a very profound input, and I think a very important one. We can't have our people meaningfully participate if they're not capacitated to participate. That's a very important one. I've got one last question which I'm going to deal with, number 4.
Thank you so much, Program Director, for the opportunity. Mine is just a quick comment. My name is Tulani Mdlalose from Sunparks, based in Golden Gate, Free State. Mine is just a quick comment on the issue of policies and the inclusion of communities in those policies. You know, from my experience of how we try to include communities in understanding the policies, be it biodiversity-related policies or other policies, is that in most cases the drive is mostly a tick box exercise rather than actually making sure that the intended communities actually understand what the policy requires of them and make meaningful inputs into those policies. I will make a good example. Not so long ago, we were dealing with the white paper on biodiversity in the Free State, and in that engagement, time was very limited for the communities to actually engage. Secondly, the issue of language, language barrier. As much as we may have interpreters trying to make sure that the communities are understanding what is being presented to them, but it doesn't really get to the bottom of it. Because at the end of the day, what we want is just to say we have done stakeholder engagement on this policy and we tick the box off, but without actually ensuring that the intended recipients of the information actually do get the information and they are able to give meaningful inputs on that. The other issue that I would also like...
We just need to rush up a bit, but please let me get that issue.
Okay, yes, the other issue, just a quick one, is that the way we are formulating policies and engaging our policies, I've seen that there's a drive to actually also take into account indigenous knowledge of the communities. Communities have been practicing conservation for a very, very long time, I mean, since time began. And if we leave that out when we revisit our policies, we will not actually get to the bottom of what we are trying to achieve. And the intended beneficiation from biodiversity to the communities will actually travel in a snail's pace if we don't take that into consideration as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very good input. You know, we need to get beyond just token exercises, talking to people. And I think I'm going to conclude now. The panel has done a very, very good exercise here. Sue started us up with having to say, how do we get ourselves to be number one, continue to be number one forever? When I'm listening to what my panel members has suggested to us, when I'm listening to what's happening on the floor, we are already thriving and we are already looking at thriving nature. But we need something more than that. Maybe we need to have a new term even called thrivability. It's about both nature and people benefiting, especially when everybody can equally participate in the decision making and deciding how we do and be equally capacitated to do that. It's going to take us to regenerative stuff. It's going to take us dealing with our past better, like what was highlighted a bit earlier. And I think the last one is the motto of thrivability is, the game is on. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, panelists. So when we started, we thought we had enough time. We could even stop at 5. So as Sam indicated, we now have to save time and be done by 3:45. So I'm not going to waste time. I'm going to Dr. Ntuli. Please come back. This is your commission. So we're moving to the second sub-commission, creating a sustainable wildlife economy community. So I'm going to allow you time to invite your panelists, and we'll just indicate when you're running out of time. We hope to have enough time for the audience to participate as well. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much, Program Director. Let me start by acknowledging the presence of our chiefs and also all the dignitaries that are among us. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So this session, we are going to look at creating sustainable wildlife economy community. So the idea of sustainability has been around, and it speaks to 3 pillars: the economic side, the environmental side, and also the social side. So without these pillars, we have a problem because the system won't be stable. So to stabilize it, we need to conserve our resources. We need also to make profits. We need also to make sure that people benefit from everything that is happening. So we need to create a sustainable community. So that's the whole idea of the panel that we are going to call on the platform. So the first panel member that I'm going to call is Dr. Wiseman Lovo from Stellenbosch University. Can we all So he's a researcher in rural development and is also a program manager for Away. I'm also going to call upon Mr. Leboheng Pasha. He is from the National Empowerment Fund. Is he around, Mr. Lebongang? Okay. Yeah, okay. The next person is Mr. Zwanele Memani from the Department of Small Business Development. Can we give him a round of applause? And then Mr. Jonathan Denga from Northwest Department of Economic Development, Environment, Conservation and Tourism. Then I will call Mr. Ngali Mochongwana. Sorry, I'm Zimbabwean, so my my pronunciation is not very good of some of this. Mr. Ngali, can we all give Mr. Ngali a round of applause, please? Yeah. So Mr. Ngali is from Sunparks, so he's going to share with us. Then finally, the last panel member was not able to be here with us. It's Miss Noma Tembalanga, but she shared some notes that I will also share with you as we proceed. So we are going to look at four themes or questions that we're going to address. And the first theme that we're going to look at is the role of self-organization and institutions to facilitate participation in the wildlife economy. And the question that we're asking there is how as a collective can we strengthen the support packages such as financial, business, infrastructure support, and training, etc., offered to previously disadvantaged individuals and communities as a means to facilitate their meaningful participation in the mainstream economy. And to address this question, please allow me to invite our panel member, Mr. Ngali from Sunparks.
Thank you, Mr. Facilitator. I was told it's a skill to use a mic, so I'll try and use it properly. I think the first thing that we need to acknowledge is that we are running out of time. We're sitting with more than 30% of unemployment in South Africa, and most of those people that are unemployed, actually you find them in the rural areas. And in the majority, they are young people. And the majority of them totally depend on the natural resources we're talking about. And I think what the Premier indicated as IEP-yapping, we honestly don't have enough time to IEP-yap. So I think as part of what we are asked to do now is also to understand what are the challenges. Why do we continue to deliver limited results? Firstly, the challenge that I think we're actually faced with in creating sustainable communities are the communities themselves. And the second one, of course, as I said, is the IEP-yapping from the practitioners. And I think it's not due to lack of resources. It's not due to lack of knowledge and understanding from the wealth of knowledge that is around. It's not lack of bankable projects. But then what is the problem? So I think if we're to start with communities, as I said, we're running out of time. And we all know that we're dealing with people that are disempowered and they don't have the necessary resources. And sometimes they lack the knowledge to understand what these things we're talking about. We're also dealing with people who are getting demotivated and to a large extent are disillusioned. So we need to deal with those issues before we can even talk about how to move forward. And people have lost trust. and have also lost hope. So we're dealing with those issues. There's also an over-dependence in most cases in some of these projects from the officials and other practitioners. And for that reason, you lack champions from communities. And I think the issue of institutional arrangements and is causing dysfunctionality and from the community structures that are established. So they are poorly organized and they are very weak in terms of governance. Communities are also desperate and disintegrated. And I guess it's because of the overpromises that are not delivered. And their disintegration, it's something that we need to deal with. People are hungry and they are tired of waiting. And, but also I thought it is important just to deal with the issue of community, just because we always use loosely the word community when we refer to communities from rural areas as well as townships. We assume a lot about what they want and the structures in their background. And we may need to look at that as well so that we don't actually exclude individuals with common interests that have got interest as well. So that means as we go from here, so when we look at who is a community also, I always find that we actually exclude people who have benefited, so we need to look at that. And for me, in terms of how do we move forward as a collective, I think it also starts with what Dr. Ndul refers to as a simple equation. In order for wildlife management to be an economically viable option for communities, we also need to make sure that the benefit from sustainable wildlife resources for communities are greater than the cost of managing resources. And for that to happen, obviously we need to eliminate, some of the costs, or rather, we use to maximize the benefit and minimize the costs. So that will encourage people to participate, and that's how we achieve sustainability. We always don't have solutions to deal with the costs. Some of those costs are caused by, example, elephants going to devour millefills and lions and killing goats and so forth. But those things, we need to deal with them because those are the things that can also minimize the cost to compensate for the losses. As a collective, I think we've done a lot of things, but I don't think we've been intentional in actually achieving some of the things. Number one thing that we need to be very intentional in achieving is making sure that the issue of ownership, including land as well as resources, are very important. The rights of communities to utilize their resources is very important, because without the right to a resource, it's difficult to make decisions in terms of how that resource is managed. So we need to be very intentional about that one. The issue of establishing market linkages and distribution networks for community-produced products. We've got a lot of communities that we have established in terms of game farmers and people who are dealing with bioprospecting. But the big challenge now is not just about the ownership, it's also about access to markets. We also need to have a focused capacity building programs, which actually including specialized training and tailor-made for the needs or to the needs of the different community groups. And what's also very important is that we also need a flexible but a special wildlife economy fund that actually in the form of grants, whether it's a blended finance, because there is money out there, but I guess it's not targeted to wildlife, but I think we need a special fund to deal with those issues. The money can be utilized for infrastructure and so forth and so forth. But also communities need to be equipped with essential tools and resources for effective and sustainable use of resources. I think also it is always important to introduce performance-based incentives to encourage people to participate in some of these activities. And of course, technical support is also required. But the most important part of what we do, or which we should be doing and not doing, is establishing robust monitoring and evaluation mechanisms so that we're able to track the effectiveness and the impact of the programs that we're implementing from both social, economic, and ecological aspects. Chairperson, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me just reiterate that we are running out of time, and then we'll give the remaining panelists maybe 2 minutes to say a little bit of your topics. So the next person that I'm going to invite is Dr. Wiseman Lovo, and is going to answer the question, how can we expand sustainable hunting for traditional or subsistence use, especially for community-owned areas? So, Dr. Wiseman, please take the lead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Antuli. Thank you very much to the audience. My name is Love Wiseman, as he has already introduced. So the first question here that we need to ask ourselves when we talk about sustainable hunting for traditional use or subsistence use is for us to understand what do we mean by subsistence use. When we say subsistence use, we are saying the use of wildlife products, particularly in this case, hunting or harvesting from the nature reserves or protected areas or even the community-owned areas for subsistence living or to support their day-to-day living needs. But this also involves those people that harvest to generate small income, not at a large scale, but small income to support themselves. So by looking into this, we need also to say, how then do we talk about unsustainability? Because when we say we want to have a sustainable use, it means we are suggesting that there is unsustainability in the system, or there is fear of unsustainability in the system. What are the causes of this thinking, or what are the causes of these unsustainable practices? One of them is because it's rooted on historical context, particularly looking at land dispossession and versus communities and rights or right to ownership of wildlife. So all these circumstances of dispossession has left most of these communities surrounding reserves and in these community-owned lands or in next to protected areas, feeling that they still have the right to these particular species that we find in the reserves. Therefore, they don't consider it as poaching or anything other than that it belongs to them and is part of their sustenance or is part of what they need for them to survive. So that's why they jump the fences, they go harvest in any other way that they feel is suitable. So if we now understand all this and looking at the property rights now and the legal framework that we're using, that the communities do not have the right to these animals, but they, in their thinking or in their history, they still believe that these animals or these resources, natural resources, still belongs to them. Therefore, they start to harvest them unsustainably or poaching or jumping fences, as I've said. So if we appreciate this undertaking, then it gives us a reason to start thinking of methodologies of how then do we build these sustainable communities that exist with wildlife economies. Part of this is forming a clear partnership between the protected areas, the private reserves, and also recognizing the subsistence needs of these communities that exist in the peripherals. So when we say partnerships, how do these partnerships then work? We talk about working with the community, identifying their indigenous knowledge systems of harvesting on how they used to practice, that is harvesting and also extraction of different resources in the bush, and then looking at what we are currently doing in terms of what we call sustainable harvesting or hunting. Then if we merge these two, then we can start to build a sustainable collaboration between protected areas management, between private reserves and also other landowners. And then we build skills surrounding this, considering what they know as the community in terms of sustainability and with these modernized ways of harvesting. So if we incorporate those and bring them together, I believe that it could also give us an opportunity at least to have sustainable use and expansion. So partnership, training skills, and also even, of course, looking at community-owned, community community-owned enterprises where communities could come together in the form of cooperatives and so forth, so that they can at least work with these protected areas, reserves, and so forth. I know that we have limited time, but we could have said more. Dr. Ntuli, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Wiseman Lovo. So let's move on to the next topic on enterprise development and access to value chains in the game meat industry. So let me invite Mr. Mzanele Memani to answer the question, how can we establish large-scale enterprises for harvesting and processing game meat from extensive wildlife systems, including value chain development, including from substantial plains game on community-owned land, growing the collective game meat industry. Mr. Memani, please may take the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, facilitator, and good afternoon to everyone. That's a great question you are posing because I think the two previous speakers have really touched on some of the elements of enterprise development, such as capacity building, training, funding, market linkages, and I think Dr. Ndlovu mentioned the partnerships, which are key, and I just want to really nail on partnerships. One of the proposals, facilitator, I think we can put forward in this conference is really, again, the concept of clustering and clusters. It's one of the concepts that are happening, but I don't think as a country we are getting into the in-depth execution of this methodology. It's really about identifying those businesses that are in the same industry. So as you mentioned in the question, if you look at businesses that are in the game meat industry, we cluster them so that they learn to collaborate and work together. So they can still compete as private sector companies, as cooperatives, or whatever they are registered as, but at the same time, whilst competing, they can collaborate. And the reason for that is to make sure they deal with impediments. And I think since yesterday, people have highlighted the challenges of access to funding as a barrier. And I think all of us, yesterday and today, we seem to pick up that it's going to be difficult for any individual enterprise to access funding on their own. They can try, but I think from experience, when businesses tend to work together and collaborate, there's flow of information. And I think that would be my humble proposal, that we do identify a challenge, that there's a disintegration, there's disjointedness, but the solution is for us to propose possibly the clustering and clusters of these enterprises. And the way forward is that you will see the flow of support that has been highlighted here, coming into those enterprises and improving their competitiveness. Because I think that's what clusters want to do, is to improve the competitiveness of enterprises. And I think, as you mentioned, value chain, the idea is these enterprises are able to participate in the private sector value chains because they understand where opportunities are throughout the value chain. And so there are few projects we've started, but they are not in the biodiversity space. But I want to believe, facilitator, we can learn from some of the cluster projects that we are exploring as the department, possibly to work with our partners. And I'm glad as an academic institution you're here because there the approach we promote is the triple helix approach, where you have government, the private sector, and the academia. And for the private sector, what we're looking at is not just the SMMEs and the cooperatives, but also to identify a lead firm that is there, where the SMMEs can participate in the value chain of the lead firm or a big firm. Thank you, facilitator.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Memani. Let me invite our last panel member to just give us a wind up of the discussion that we've just had. Let me invite Mr. Jonathan Denga to, thank you.
Thank you very much, facilitator, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm Jonathan Denga from DDECT, Northwest Province. That's the province of Bokoni-Perima. And I must say that I think the province of Bokoni-Perima is just about, one of the first provinces that actually went as far as trying to actualize the implementation of the, outcomes of the biodiversity economy strategy when it was developed as far as back as 2016. And I think we have some few things that we can share with the people. And I think I don't want to repeat those that my colleagues have already touched on. But one thing that I believe in critically is that, we have enough resources in South Africa. Our challenge, as has been said, is about how do we grow the pie to ensure that we include those who were previously excluded into this industry. The wildlife sector, as we tend to decode it, when we talk about the communities, we tend not to include the industry itself. And I think that it is very key, if we were to talk about transformation, that we cluster the communities and the private sector itself within the wildlife industry. And I say that with a reason, because I believe wholeheartedly that government can never be a transformer, and the government can never really grow this industry. We can only be the enabler of that process. And we need the private sector, the industry itself, to begin to work closely with the people in the communities. We can choose to have these protected areas, these game reserves, game ranches, that are surrounded by this sea of poverty around them from the communities, people who are excluded completely, who are not forming any part to that particular industry. Or we can get up ourselves and begin to pull them in and work together with them. And I must say that there are certain issues that I believe they are key enablers that we need to look into. We underestimate the fact that biodiversity itself or wildlife itself is quite a scientific term, and that needs to be decoded. We need to begin to educate our people out there to understand what we mean by biodiversity. And if it means that we need to brand it in a particular way that resonates with the ways of their practice, where they are, and I think that should be the best. And I can make one example that we've done in the Northwest Province. Back then we created a brand called Miwala ya Runa, and which was cherished by many, including those in the community. And then the industry came in as well on board, and then they began to work together with the community under that particular brand. And that brand was just basically to say, this is what we call biodiversity, and this is what we call biodiversity must then be associated with as a symbol of a possible wealth that can be garnered. And that worked very well. I think that the other issue that perhaps we are not giving much attention to is the issue of land. I would have loved to have, I call them land affairs, okay? That's the Department of Agriculture, Rural Development. They should have been here today. They are, the people who are buying a lot of land from people. And majority of this land that they buy, even though it is sustainable, wildlife operation, it tends to be, changed around to an easy cattle farming, once it's received by the community members or once it's received by the beneficiaries. Because that seems to be the only quickest thing that we can pull out of pocket. We know how to farm cattle. And I think I'm saying that in bringing the issue of capacity building. That cannot be underestimated, whether we need to hold each other's hand, in a form of mentorship, in partnerships, for exchange of knowledge. Let it be, and we need that, as soon as possible. Yeah, somebody spoke about the funding earlier on. I'm glad there seems to be, some elements of, holes of lights out in the sky. Perhaps if we can just give it a bit of wind behind, we can be able to break this code. Funding is clearly a biggest challenge. Wildlife operation is not a cheap operation. And that is why many people turn out to go back to the goats and the cattle that they have. So we definitely need to resolve that issue. And I think that the marketing platform have been said. We need to ensure that we have, we put value in the product that we create. Without value, nobody's going to want to keep it. Without value, nobody's going to want to be bothered to harbor the wildlife on their land. And it's always been that if you use it, if it can be used, it will stay, it will grow. But if you inhibit people from using the wildlife, it will always be a problem. You will curtail the value. And I think, just for the sake of time, I want to end there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Jonathan Deringa. Let's open up to the floor for questions, discussions, comments, suggestions. Maybe what we're just going to do, like the previous, we're just going to pick from each of these rows. If we have, so we have one there, here. On this row. Okay, we have two. So maximum of two per row. So in this row, there's no question. What if we come here, we have 1, 2. So from that row, we don't have anyone? Okay. Oh, at the back. At the back. Okay, so let's start. Let's start with my sister here. Give you. Okay, in front. Yeah. Okay, you can start.
Thank you very much. My name is Keifas Kumalo. I work for the government in KZN and in Ismangaliso. This session had been one of the most interesting ones when you listen to it. More so because it starts actually distilling some of the things that we perceiving as problems and further proposes some of the things that we need to do. But on my view, I think that history should actually inform us to implement our proposal in rather a more careful manner. Let me pick up the discussion around sustainability, which was actually discussed earlier on by some of the panelists. One of the inclination that we actually locked ourselves in is that probably local communities are actually ravaging our natural resources because they do not understand. They don't even know that we can use these natural resources, but we need to use them sustainably. But according to my understanding, not negating the prudence of us actually creating awareness and educating them, but according to my understanding, in South Africa, all management authorities who are broadly and by and large actually charged with the responsibility of managing our natural resources, they have a sizable and big community conservation programs within them. And one of the critical things that we're seeking to do with those programs is to make sure that our local communities are not only actually law enforced, but they're also actually educated and told how to use things sustainably. But you'll find that invariably, in most cases, elements of unsustainability in terms of using natural resources continues. So without negating that particular proposal, maybe another angle that I can propose here is that while we understand that people don't understand the issue of sustainability, but what are other strategies that we can couple the implementation of educating them with sustainability so that we can realize a meaningful actually change in their behavior. At least on my experience in KZN, I'm not going to mention places, but there's a place where community go and actually ravage the wetland for cultivation. We have put numerous and endless and magnitude actually programs to educate them about the issues of natural resource management. But the next day they go back there. So what do? Do I go exponentially and put more programs to educate them, or I realize that we need other strategies to be able to deal with that so that we can actually hit the problem itself? The point I'm making here that while we realize that people don't understand sustainability, but we may want actually to strategize ourselves so that we can put other strategies to deal with people's behavior on our natural resources. The second point is the issue of clustering the SMME so that they can realize actual successes in their implementation. Again, my boss, when I work with him, he says that cooperatives and other initiatives that government has actually initiated in the past has resulted to some successes, but also has actually encountered challenges. So when you look at the things that way we're going to have a big community program that will be owned by community or large number of people together, unless, again, we put strategic way of dealing with it, we have seen in our history that there's a lot of failures in that. So while we're also clustering these people together, we must also identify another element of strategies that will be able to say that while they're together, we do not negate and also lead them to unsuccessfulness. Because when we put many people doing one thing, in some cases, inherently you tend actually to get things that actually are going to jeopardize this. In short, both sustainability and clustering, I think it's a good proposal, but I'm appealing that let's actually go to them with an open eye and be strategic in their implementation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for a wonderful contribution and also expanding on the issue of sustainability. Let's listen to the next.
Good afternoon. My name is Claire Nyezi from Healers for Change. The gentleman just said a lot, which was really for me. But just to give a point, the community, I find the word community for me is too vague. I would suggest that first you find the users of these wildlife products. I'm saying this, we as healers use a lot of wildlife products. So adding them on a lot of programs is actually will be a good exercise. We've been trying to get through to a lot of offices, environmental affairs. We did meet with Biodiversity, and we're always asking for licenses to have or to get permits in order for us to harvest. We've got hunters who will always bring the same animals and we've got amaqhele who will always harvest mutis that we're using. And you find that at times they duplicating or even getting too much of what we have or what is needed. Meaning maybe trying to get people that are the users to be trained will be one of the best exercise. And also on this part of skills, we really need to be skilled on such things as gardens. We need botanical gardens. We always try to get a government to give us some land for such practices. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the wonderful contribution. So let's listen to...
Good afternoon. My name is Vivian Petla, and I'm from Indaba Inclusive South Africa. I just want to comment on the enterprise development component that has been mentioned by the speakers. And in the work that we do at Indaba, we do a lot of work in the communities, and we focus on enterprise development, looking at social and environmental enterprises. And I just wanted to comment that we have looked at many sectors in communities, especially agriculture, water, waste, energy, biodiversity, but to a certain extent, we've not really come across a rural-based or community-based enterprise that focus on wildlife economy, mostly because it's been mentioned. That cost a lot of money to establish an enterprise like that. But Ngali has mentioned that if we look at a specialized fund on wildlife economy, that could actually help a lot. And we could look at a replication model. So a replication model is something that we use quite a lot, and I think it can work in wildlife economy because there are already large enterprises or businesses that are in the wildlife economy, but those businesses can actually adopt or support entrepreneurs that are based in rural communities who want to venture into such a sector. So I just wanted to comment on that if the fund is specialized, it can actually help a lot of enterprises that are based on those communities. Just recently, we are in the final stages of launching a fund that is focusing on the green economy with Nedbank. So something like that could actually help, because if the focus is just on biodiversity or wildlife economy, then you know the target, the kind of entrepreneurs or enterprises that you'll be supporting. So I just wanted to comment on that it's something that is possibly doable, but it needs resources, especially looking at skills and financial resources as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much for a wonderful contribution. Let's listen to another contribution from the back.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. My name is Colin Lowe. I'm the chairperson of the Komani San community in the Kalahari, Northern Cape. I have an outcry here. In 2018, our late minister, Etna Molewa, she gave us funding. I will not divulge the amount or what she gave us for fencing of the farm, the game farm, and also for information center. Now I would like to know, and that came through the EPUB project, the time frame of that, the funding for that. How long does it take? Because since 2018 until now, we didn't receive anything. We have problems with our fencing. The park can't give us any game because our fencing is not in a good shape. So that's the one. I would like to know the time frame for that. We also want to find out, is there any funding for drought to help us in those drought times? Then we have also struggled as community with counting of the game. We get sometimes help from certain hunters who came there, also from VRSA. We would like to know, is there any help for training for our rangers, the drown training, so that we can do the counting in a more sustainable way, because we're struggling by counting by foot. So that's my questions that I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for a wonderful contribution. And for the sake of time, before I hand over to let me just give a quick rundown of the main points. I think all the contributions, they were quite remarkable, and some of the most important things that came out with regards to creating a sustainable community includes the issue of funding. So this is a very big issue, I think, that is cracking the heads of our program coordinators, directors of the wildlife economy. Where is this money going to come from? And definitely we really need money to push this thing forward, to make sure that the new recruits or the communities, disadvantaged communities and the new private game farm owners actually can achieve the objectives of conservation while at the same time also benefiting from the activity that they are doing. So the benefit issue and also incentive compatibility, which has been discussed, can be achieved through other means, for example, through market-led voluntary mechanisms. So this is an important aspect of conservation, where the participants actually participate voluntarily in the in schemes that can certify their operation as sustainable and sustainable, so that they can also access markets. So there are economic incentives associated with these voluntary schemes in terms of regulatory compliance, in terms of reputation and branding. You know, given what is happening, the outcry out there about hunting. So this becomes very, very crucial to certify our production systems, to say this is actually sustainable. And also it's important for collaboration and networking, getting investors, bringing in the necessary funds that are needed to support the wildlife sector. So let me thank our panelists, the members that contributed to this, and all who contributed. Let me hand over back to the program director. Thank you so much.
You, Herbert, and all the panelists from the last commission. We have 14 minutes. I'm not sure if overall, looking at the icebreaker, the first commission, the one that we have completed, any one or two parting shots before I hand over to Letitia just to share with us how we've summarized the deliberations. Obviously, we still need to work on that tonight. So we'll have the meeting with the team and refine so that tomorrow at plenary, it's a refined product. Okay, I don't see any hands. So as Letitia comes up to share the summary of what we deliberated on, I think actually it was an intense session with the two commissions. However, the inputs were valuable. But if we go back and reflect on the goal of this commission, I think scale is coming up very strong, transformation, but also I think it was the last commission, land use and how we have productive land use for meaningful participation in the sector. And I think one critical pillar or element of this that wasn't well defined or captured in the goal is skills development, information sharing, which will enable or ensure that especially the entrepreneurs and the small scale participants to have a meaningful participation in this sector. So the comments are still open on the draft. I think people that were not able to participate today could also do that on the website and do input as we give feedback to the strategy or the draft strategy. So I'm going to allow Letitia to just reflect on the summary of our deliberations.
Thank you very much, HOD, and good afternoon once again. I would like to firstly appreciate our panel speakers for really showing us that they can actually operate on an elevator kind of a pitch. Yesterday we put our industries in that moment of operating within a timed program where you are given 3 minutes, you know, to sell your business to the investors. And little did we know that today in our commission, our panel are going to be given the same approach to actually broaden engagement on the revised NBES, as the HOD has actually indicated. The good thing about this session is that it's not yet over. You still have all the time to go and look at those proposed action and the goal itself and give us more feedback based especially on what you've heard from the experts here, because they were trying to unpack what is in the N-based strategy, just to help you to give us more input. So we are really, really looking forward to receive more input from you. So just to quickly go into what we have really covered under the two themes that we have given you, balancing the wildlife and the economy, looking at the regulatory environment. So what has actually came out of the discussion strongly at the challenges, of course, the issue of regulatory environment came out very strongly, and I think we have been made aware that we are missing an opportunity in our regulation, because we are not taking into consideration the diversity of our wildlife. People, when they think about wildlife, they only focus on the game. What about other species? And then the issue of our regulations that are inadequate, issues of changing circumstances. We go to this CITES convention, and then we come back with this decision. How long does it take us to align our regulation in order to allow our wildlife sector to thrive? Then the other aspect that was also considered was issues of recognizing our cultural aspect in our legislation. Of course, the white paper has started to make that consideration, but I'm so grateful that it has actually come out of this session, and also highlighting that as much as we want to bring in our cultural system in our policies, we should not forget the sustainable development principles. And also the issues of unintended consequences came out from these discussions, where we are not looking at the marginalized communities in our policies and the negative impact of the policies, and also the stakeholder gap in terms of consultation. But I think here we have a mix of all stakeholders. I have seen youth, I've seen community representatives, and they have taken the floor and engaged us. So we are at least starting to improve on our approach in that area. And of course, some of the solutions suggested are that the N-base will, if this N-base can be really revised and be reworked based on the input that we are going to receive from yourself, then that will also assist us in increasing the investment that has been asked by Sue during the icebreaker, if the N-base will still keep South Africa as the top priority country for investment. The next aspect that came out was about market access, where we are talking about limited access and lack of knowledge about the expectation of the consumers. These are some of the aspects that requires attention. Indeed, we have some instrument already in place, like our sustainability standards and the certification scheme that we developed with yourself. It was co-created by government and the stakeholders. And then there's issue of finance that was also identified in this discussion around the lack of understanding of the wild sector by the financing institution. And I think what we are doing now, it will help us to see even all the commercial bank may be making provision for our wildlife sector to be able to access the funding that is much needed. The issues of access to land and also financial resource, it also came out again. And then there were issues about the intergovernmental structures or multi-stakeholder platforms that we have, that they also lack other areas, like we're not having a platform that are this platform really looking into issues of access to land and the financial resource. When you meet in your wildlife forum, are you really dealing with the real issues, or what are you really looking at? And there are many forums that are focusing on many things. How about we integrate and focus on one objective as a collective, as a biodiversity economy sector? There were issues about the insufficient business support, looking at the private sector and the SMMEs. These are some of the things, but of course, there were input from the floor that there are some funding mechanisms that are in the pipeline, and we are really appreciative of that. And we are really appreciative of the fact that our cooperative system needs to be reviewed, because as much as there are many successes, we also have some failures. Lack of education was another aspect that came out challenging our institution of learning from the primary to high learning, that they must really consider this issue of teaching our children about the benefits of the biodiversity that we have as our natural asset in the country. So that is basically around the balancing wildlife and the economy session. Coming to the creation of a sustainable wildlife economy community. This community, we are looking at a community that is comprised of the emerging and the well-established wildlife ranchers. We want to see the value chain that is really operating in the country, inclusive of all role players. We do not want to showcase South Africa as #1 in the region, and yet we find our emerging wildlife ranchers still struggling to fit into the sector. So there are a number of issues that were raised here under the empowerment of communities that we have really noted, and issues of ensuring that there is sustainability in that area. Thank you very much, HOD. You may then ascend the stage and give a closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Lakeisha. So that's how far we could go, a good summary of our deliberations. I want to thank each and every one of you, the panelists, the organizers, and everyone in the room. So you are free to go. We still have a lot of work to do. Thank you. Have a good night further. We were told the program starts at 9 tomorrow morning. Here, all of us and the other commissions, 9 o'clock. Thank you.